You're not a bad rider. You just might be making U-turns harder than they need to be. Today, I'll reveal 5 mistakes that hold riders back, and more importantly, how to fix them. Each one builds on the last, and the final tip will completely change your control. Stick with me until the end to find out. Number 5. Not using enough space. There is a funny truth about motorcycles that every rider discovers sooner or later. The smaller and lighter the machine feels under you, the easier it is to overestimate what it can actually do. When riders step into a parking lot or a quiet side street to practice their U-turns, they often believe that their compact motorcycle should be able to spin inside a space no wider than a driveway. The reality is far different. Even the most agile two-wheeler still demands room to breathe. Trying to cut a turn too tight, without claiming the full width of the lane, leaves riders wobbling, dabbing their foot down, or in some cases, dropping the bike entirely. The first mistake, then, is failing to use enough space. Think about the design of a motorcycle. The wheelbase is stretched farther apart than most riders realize. Even on smaller sport machines or mid-size commuters, the frame geometry creates an arc that needs a decent radius to complete smoothly. Cutting into a turn too early shortens that radius, forcing the motorcycle into a sharper lean angle than most riders are prepared to handle. The result is awkward body language, choppy throttle inputs, and a desperate hope that the bike does not tip beyond the point of no return. Riders who respect the physical size of their machine immediately reduce their stress because they work with the geometry instead of against it. There is also a psychological trap at play. Many riders who start on a smaller bike, perhaps a 300 cubic centimeter trainer or a 500 cubic centimeter commuter, get lulled into believing that their motorcycle is as forgiving as a bicycle. They cut corners, lean early, and find themselves clipping curbs or stalling mid-turn. The motorcycle does not forgive impatience. It demands space, even if your mind insists you can squeeze through a tighter arc. Respecting this reality changes the entire feel of slow-speed control. One powerful drill is marking 2 parking spaces side by side in an empty lot. Together, they measure about 36 feet, wide enough for almost any motorcycle to complete a U-turn. By using the full width, riders retrain instincts, carving smooth arcs that transfer to real-world streets and driveways. History shows that motor officers have relied on this principle for decades. Police training courses across the United States often set up U-turn boxes that are generous in width at first, only narrowing as the officer gains skill. They know that building confidence with space helps the rider feel stable before introducing tighter constraints. Civilian riders can steal this wisdom by starting with wide arcs. There is no shame in using more pavement than you think you should. With repetition, the radius naturally shrinks as your skills sharpen. Beyond physics and psychology lies another layer: ego. Riders often believe that needing more room makes them look inexperienced. The truth is the opposite. Skilled riders deliberately claim space on the road because they understand how vital it is. They swing wide, head up, body loose, and motorcycle balanced. The amateur, on the other hand, crowds himself into a tiny patch of asphalt and struggles, all while believing that smaller is better. Confidence is not about squeezing your U-turn into the smallest square possible. Confidence is about making the turn clean, safe, and repeatable, no matter how much space it takes. Another tip worth noting involves vision. When you allow yourself to use the full lane, your eyes can naturally scan further into the turn. This keeps your head lifted, your shoulders relaxed, and your throttle smoother. Restricting your path into a tight corner shortens your vision as well, forcing your eyes to drop to the ground. That single difference in perspective is often the reason one U-turn feels stable while another feels terrifying. And as we step forward in this countdown, remember, failing to claim space is just the beginning. If the 5th mistake is about respecting the width of the road, the 4th mistake digs into something even more personal: the power of where you choose to set your gaze. If this already helped you spot a mistake, hit like and drop a comment. Tell me which one hit hardest. Number 4, looking down instead of ahead. Eyes steer the motorcycle long before the handlebars ever move, and yet many riders forget this simple truth when they attempt a U-turn. They drop their gaze to the asphalt just a few feet in front of their tire, hypnotized by the spinning ground. In that moment, the motorcycle loses direction, the rider stiffens up, and the turn becomes a wobbly fight instead of a smooth arc. This mistake is so common that even seasoned riders fall into it after years of habits built from walking and driving cars. Looking down instead of ahead remains one of the greatest enemies of balance and confidence. When we walk, our eyes naturally drift downward to spot cracks in the sidewalk or to notice the edge of a curb. That habit keeps us from tripping on our own feet. But motorcycles are not shoes. At even 5 miles an hour, the bike covers ground so quickly that staring at the pavement directly in front of the wheel is the same as staring at the past. You are always behind the curve. By the time your eyes catch up, the motorcycle has already carried you somewhere else. It is like trying to navigate a river by staring at the water splashing off your bow instead of scanning the bend ahead. Instructors stress vision in every class. They tell riders to point their chin toward the exit, fix eyes on the horizon, and trust peripheral vision. Jerry, a retired motor officer, taught that eyes steer the body and handlebars. Students laughed in disbelief until lifting their gaze instantly smoothed every turn. The transformation can feel almost magical. A rider who was once toppling cones or dabbing feet suddenly glides through the same pattern without touching a single marker. Nothing about the motorcycle has changed. The clutch is the same, the throttle is the same, and the brake is untouched. Only the eyes have shifted, and yet the entire dynamic of the machine has changed because vision pulls the body into alignment. Consider the parallel with driving a car. When making a left turn across an intersection, you do not stare at the dashed white line beneath your front bumper. You look across the intersection at the far corner, and your hands gently follow the arc. Motorcycles demand the exact same treatment, only more exaggerated. If your gaze drops to the front tire, you lock your shoulders and tense your grip. If your gaze shoots to the exit of the turn, your arms relax, your torso leans, and the motorcycle bends into the U-turn with far less effort. Motor police training courses have long understood this. Officers who weave through patterns as tight as 18 feet do not achieve this by muscling the handlebars. They achieve it by looking deep into the turn and letting their machine follow. Some training manuals from the 1970s already highlighted the phrase head and eyes as the golden rule of low-speed maneuvering. That principle has not changed in nearly 50 years, and it will not change in the next 50 either. Physics stays constant, and so does the power of vision. Another reason riders look down is fear. The moment the motorcycle leans, especially for newer riders, the brain screams danger. Looking down is an instinctive response, like glancing at your feet on a high ladder. Unfortunately, that instinct makes the wobble worse. The cure is deliberate practice. Riders must train themselves to look away from the fear and into the path they wish to follow. Over time, confidence grows, and the temptation to glance down fades. So remember this: the motorcycle goes where you look. The road is wide, the horizon is waiting, and your eyes are the key to unlocking balance. And now, as we roll forward in our countdown, the fourth mistake of vision prepares the way for the third mistake of control, where the subtle pressure of the rear brake often becomes a hidden trap. The right gear makes practice safer and long rides more comfortable. Helmets, gloves, and essentials are all lined up. Link is in the description. Number 3. Riding the rear brake too hard. Power and control are a rider's closest allies, but when those two are handled poorly, they can quickly turn against you. Nowhere is this more obvious than with the rear brake. Many motorcyclists, especially when learning U-turns or other low-speed maneuvers, lean far too heavily on that back pedal. They press and hold as if the rear brake were a lifeline, and in doing so, they choke the flow of the motorcycle. Instead of gliding through the turn with balance, the machine stutters, jerks, or even stalls. Riding the rear brake too hard is not just a mechanical misstep. It is a habit that can hold back progress for years if left unchecked. The rear brake is designed as a stabilizer in low-speed control. Unlike the front brake, which can cause a sudden dive or imbalance when applied sharply, the rear brake offers a gentler drag. A slight touch keeps the motorcycle settled while the rider balances clutch and throttle. Police motor units, experienced instructors, and competition riders all use that gentle rear brake pressure as part of the holy trinity of slow control: head and eyes, friction zone, and light rear brake. The trouble begins when light becomes constant or heavy. Too much pressure from that rear pedal acts like an anchor, dragging the motorcycle out of rhythm and destroying the natural lean needed for a clean U-turn. Think of it like trying to run with a rope tied around your waist. No matter how strong your stride, the rope keeps yanking you back. That is exactly what excessive rear brake pressure does. It steals momentum. The engine struggles against the brake, the rider panics and adds more throttle, and the entire motion becomes jerky. In extreme cases, the motorcycle stalls mid-turn, leaving the rider to wrestle with gravity. All of this comes not from lack of skill elsewhere, but from an over-reliance on the brake that was supposed to help. Another hidden cost of this mistake is wear. Rear brake pads and rotors are not built to absorb constant dragging in the way a car's braking system might. A rider who spends weeks practicing tight turns with heavy rear brake will quickly notice fading response and accelerated maintenance needs. That is money wasted and confidence shaken. Instructors who watch students hammer their rear brake often warn them with one simple truth: the brake is a tool, not a crutch. Use it with respect, and it extends your control. Abuse it, and it fights back. Psychology plays a role here as well. Riders who feel insecure at low speeds press harder on the rear brake because it gives an illusion of control. It feels safer to clamp down than to let the motorcycle roll freely. But in reality, the opposite is true. The motorcycle wants to move. It is designed to stay upright when rolling, and the rear brake disrupts that natural stability. The trick is to retrain the mind to trust a lighter touch. A feathered pedal combined with steady throttle produces flow. A stomped pedal produces chaos. Training drills help riders overcome this. One method is practicing U-turns without using the rear brake. At first, it feels terrifying and loose, but soon riders discover the motorcycle completes the arc smoothly. Without the crutch, balance returns through clutch finesse and throttle control, later reintroducing the brake lightly. There are stories from police training schools where officers must demonstrate mastery of U-turns, both with and without the rear brake. The reasoning is simple. If the component fails in real-world duty, the officer cannot afford to lose control. Civilian riders may never face that high-stakes scenario, but the principle still applies. True skill means being able to ride smoothly with or without that extra tool. Over-reliance breeds weakness. Flexibility breeds strength. One rider once confessed after months of practice that he finally noticed how often his right foot was welded to the brake pedal. He believed that pressing harder would prevent him from tipping, yet the moment he learned to lift off slightly, the motorcycle rolled easier and his turn shrank tighter. His confidence skyrocketed, not because the motorcycle changed, but because he finally trusted the machine enough to let it move. And now, having explored how heavy feet can sabotage a U-turn, we shift into the next common mistake, where the opposite problem takes over. If mistake number 3 is all about pressing too hard, mistake number 2 is about going too slow. Hesitation that robs riders of the momentum they desperately need. Number 2, going too slow to commit. Momentum is a motorcycle's best ally, yet many riders treat it as their greatest fear. When approaching a U-turn, hesitation takes over. The rider creeps forward at a crawl, convinced that slower equals safer. What happens instead is the opposite. The motorcycle begins to wobble, the handlebars feel stiff, and the engine starts to lug. The rider panics, presses the brake, and the bike threatens to tip over. Going too slow to commit is one of the most widespread mistakes in low-speed riding, and it undermines the very stability that riders desperately seek. The physics behind this are straightforward. A rolling motorcycle wants to stay upright. Centrifugal force and gyroscopic stability work together to keep the machine balanced. That stability increases with a touch of speed, even at just 10 or 12 miles an hour. When a rider cuts the pace down to 3 or 4 miles an hour, that natural stability disappears. Suddenly, the motorcycle behaves like a heavy bicycle, wobbling at the edge of balance. The rider struggles to counteract every little sway, when in fact, all they needed was a slight increase in momentum to smooth out the arc. Consider the example of a motor officer threading through a cone course. These professionals do not inch along like turtles. Instead, they keep a deliberate pace, steady throttle, and flowing lean. Their secret is not brute strength or magical balance. It is trust and momentum. Even when completing U-turns inside 18 feet, they maintain enough speed for the motorcycle to hold itself up. That confidence comes from training, yes, but more importantly from the understanding that speed is not the enemy. It is the glue that holds the entire maneuver together. Riders who go too slow often do so because of fear. The lean angle feels threatening, and adding speed feels like surrendering control. They believe that crawling through the turn will give them time to react. In reality, hesitation robs them of the very tools they need. The clutch begins to chatter, the rear brake grabs, and the motorcycle jerks. Each of those reactions increases tension in the rider's arms and shoulders, which only makes steering harder. The cycle feeds on itself until the turn collapses into a foot-down stumble. Breaking this cycle requires a deliberate shift in mindset. Instead of associating speed with risk, riders must learn to associate speed with balance. One effective drill is to set up a wide practice area, such as 2 empty parking spaces side by side. Begin the U-turn at a slightly higher pace than feels comfortable, say around 10 miles an hour instead of 3 or 4. The first few attempts may feel unnerving, but soon the motorcycle reveals its secret. With more momentum, it actually leans easier and turns tighter. What once felt unstable becomes fluid, almost effortless. There are countless stories of riders who struggled for months at a crawl, only to discover this principle. One man described his breakthrough after recording himself with a small camera mounted on his dash. He thought he was moving fast enough, but the footage revealed he was crawling at barely 5 miles an hour. An experienced instructor advised him to push closer to 11 or 12 miles an hour. The difference was immediate. His U-turns shrank tighter, his arms relaxed, and his confidence surged. The only thing that changed was his willingness to commit. Another benefit of keeping momentum is smoother throttle control. At very low speeds, every tiny twitch of the wrist has a huge effect. Add a bit more speed, and the throttle inputs even out. The motorcycle responds predictably instead of lurching. That predictability builds trust, and trust is what transforms U-turns from nerve-wracking ordeals into natural maneuvers. The belief that slower is safer feels natural. We walk slowly to avoid tripping, drive slowly in crowded parking lots, and crawl with fragile objects. Yet motorcycles follow different rules. 2 wheels are unstable at rest. Only motion creates balance. The very thing feared, speed, is what protects riders. So the next time you set up for a turn, remind yourself, hesitation is the enemy, and momentum is your ally. Lift your head, trust the throttle, and let the motorcycle carry you. And as we descend further into the countdown, the second mistake of hesitation prepares us for the most fundamental error of all, the forgotten art of counterweighting, the one principle that separates clumsy turns from effortless control. Before we reach the number 1 mistake, subscribe now, so you never miss the riding tips that transform confidence. Number 1. Forgetting to counterweight. Balance on a motorcycle is a living thing, always shifting and adapting with every movement of the rider. Among all the skills required to execute a clean U-turn, none separates the confident rider from the struggling one more than counterweighting. Yet this principle is also the most forgotten. Many riders lean their bodies in line with the motorcycle, letting the machine pull them inward, when what they truly need is the opposite, placing their weight to the outside of the turn. Forgetting to counterweight is the #1 mistake in slow-speed riding, and it is the reason so many U-turns end in dabs, stalls, or even a tip-over. To understand counterweighting, imagine the natural lean of a motorcycle. At higher speeds, the rider and the bike lean together into the curve, creating a graceful arc. This feels intuitive and smooth because the centrifugal force balances the lean angle. But in a slow U-turn, where the motorcycle is crawling at 10 or 12 miles an hour, there is not enough force to hold both bike and rider in harmony. If you lean with the machine at that pace, gravity wins and the motorcycle keeps falling. Counterweighting solves this problem. By shifting your body to the outside, you balance the lean of the bike and restore equilibrium. Motor police officers who spend countless hours navigating impossibly tight cone patterns live by this principle. They swing their hips to the outer edge of the saddle, drop their shoulders to the outside, and keep their torso upright while the motorcycle itself leans deeply beneath them. Videos of these drills often astonish civilian riders because it looks as though the officer is defying physics. In reality, he is simply respecting it. The officer allows the motorcycle to lean as much as it needs, while he counterbalances to keep gravity from toppling the machine. The origins of counterweighting as a training concept can be traced back to the mid-20th century, when instructors began codifying slow-speed techniques for military and police units. Manuals from the 1950s already included diagrams showing riders leaning outward during tight maneuvers. That knowledge has been refined through decades of instruction, but the rule has not changed. Half a century later, the exact same principle holds true. If you want to turn tightly at low speed, you must counterweight. Forgetting this is like trying to row a boat without shifting your weight. You throw yourself off balance before you even begin. Another way to visualize the concept is to picture the letter V. The motorcycle itself leans into one leg of the V, while your body forms the other leg, upright and slightly outward. The windshield becomes the invisible line dividing the two. If your head is aligned with the handlebars, you are too far inside. If your head is outside the line of the windshield, you are counterweighting correctly. That simple mental image can transform practice sessions. Riders who once toppled after every attempt suddenly find stability by keeping their head and chest on the outer edge of the V. The consequences of ignoring counterweighting are easy to spot. Riders without this habit often appear stiff, gripping the handlebars in panic as the motorcycle tips inward. Their eyes may be up, their throttle steady, and their brake light. But without counterweight, the lean overwhelms them. Instructors often describe this as the rider and bike fighting each other. The rider is pulled down with the motorcycle instead of resisting it with balanced posture. It is exhausting, demoralizing, and completely unnecessary. Correcting this mistake requires conscious effort. One useful drill is to exaggerate the motion. Practice in a wide-open lot, deliberately sliding your hips to the outside of the seat and leaning your torso upright while the motorcycle tips. At first it feels awkward, even counterintuitive, but repetition builds trust. Over time, the exaggerated posture softens into a natural adjustment, and counterweighting becomes second nature. Suddenly, U-turns that once demanded brute force and clenched jaws melt into calm, fluid arcs. The benefits extend beyond U-turns. Counterweighting helps in figure eights, cone weaves, tight parking maneuvers, and even gravel driveways. Anytime the motorcycle must lean at a low pace, counterweighting restores harmony between gravity and momentum. It is one of the few techniques that applies equally to a small, 300 cubic centimeter beginner machine and to a massive touring motorcycle weighing nearly 900 pounds. The size of the machine does not matter. What matters is the rider's decision to shift their body where it belongs. Every rider remembers the turning point. One woman, after nearly a month of failed practice, filmed herself and saw her shoulders diving with the motorcycle. Forcing her torso upright and outward, the difference was immediate. Her first clean U-turn ended with laughter, pure victory from one simple adjustment. And so we arrive at the final lesson in this countdown. From failing to use space, to dropping the eyes, to clamping the brake, to crawling too slow, and finally to forgetting counterweighting, each mistake has revealed a hidden obstacle. But the good news is that none of these errors define a bad rider. They are simply steps on the path to mastery, lessons waiting to be learned by anyone willing to practice with patience and determination. You have just learned the 5 U-turn mistakes that keep riders stuck and uncertain. Correcting them is not about perfection. It is about control, safety, and confidence every time you ride. If this video gave you even one breakthrough, hit that like button right now and share it with another rider who needs the same clarity. I also want to hear from you. Drop a comment below with your toughest challenge or biggest win. And before you go, subscribe today so you never miss the next riding tip that could completely change the way you handle your motorcycle.